Would it actually be such a disaster if we didn't come up with a deal after all? We're here in the studio to mull that over. I'm joined by Stephen Kelly, the Chief Executive of the biggest tech company in the UK, the FTSE 100 software giant Sage, and Richard Tice, who's the Chairman of the campaign group Leave Means Leave, as well as being the Chief Executive of the property investment group Quidnet Capital Partners. Right, Richard, let's kick off with you. If we didn't get a deal, would it bother you?
No, it wouldn't at all, and Tim Martin was quite right on his piece earlier. The reality is, no deal is always better than a bad deal. And no one goes into a business negotiation saying, we're going to take 2 years to negotiate this. If you put a group of business people either side of this table and said, you've got 2 months to negotiate this deal from this summer, it would be done. And you then give it to the lawyers. And I believe what the government should do, A, they should bring in some business expertise, and B, they should set very clearly a tight time frame. If we haven't agreed a deal by Q1 next year, that's fine. We walk away as friends and we revert to WTO. Everybody knows where they stand. All right,
well, we've got business expertise here. Let's talk to Stephen Kelly. I mean, first of all, Stephen, any chance in your mind of a complete deal done by the end of March 2019?
Yeah, it's hugely complex, but as Richard said, I think if you had private sector people working on both sides, actually, you would frame it where you do the heads of agreement, you get the core principles established, and then the legals follow. Part of that might be a transitional period. So it's feasible, but boy, it's ambitious, and I think it's really important they have an imperative. Interestingly, when I was in government, in the coalition government, when there was a head of steam and a real focus or a burning platform, things moved really, really quickly. So it could be done, but is ambitious, and I think to have some experience around the table is an imperative.
But as you said, if this was a private sector initiative, maybe, but it's not. I mean, there's 28 tables around that, 28 countries around that table, all with vested interest. I think Justin King said, if you wanted a negotiation, this is about as bad a place to start, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what we would call on behalf of small and medium businesses across the UK is that the politicians continue an optimistic and positive narrative. Sentiment's really important for the way businesses feel. At the moment, you know, everybody's worried about the sky falling in from June 23rd to 24th. Reality is the only major factor is sterling's been devalued. On the one hand, our customers are saying import prices have gone up. They passed most of those on to the customers. So inflation's kicked into 2-3%. On the other side, a round table a couple of weeks ago is customers were saying for exporters, they're filling their boots. Their order book is bulging. So again, I think the reality is business people just carry on and get on with it. And there's always uncertainty, and we're in uncharted waters, but they just carry on and focus on their business.
But that's why you've got to change the frame of the negotiation and you know, the framework of what's going on. Justin King is right. You know, it's not the right way to carry out a negotiation. That's why you've got to give people much more certainty and say we're going to tighten the time frame. You know, bring it much, much shorter, so that everybody knows where they stand. Because the worst thing is you know, ongoing uncertainty.
Shorter even than
much shorter, much shorter.
Richard, you know that's not going to work in the real world. You can't get a deal
in the real world. In the real world, it could absolutely happen. Frankly, by this autumn, it's because the politicians are going to play games that Justin King and you know others are saying it's going to take too long. Bring it in, change the terms of the debate, and say, look, everybody should plan for WTO. WTO is fine. Okay? A free trade agreement with the EU is just the cherry on the icing of the Brexit cake that we will have and we will eat. All the benefits from Brexit don't come from a free trade agreement. They come from controlling your own laws, trade agreements and borders. And that's got nothing to do with a free trade deal.
That's a fully loaded cake we've got, at least not an agreement.
And it will be delicious.
Stephen, half of the companies in this country use Sage software. You must have a pretty good sense of how they're feeling. Is this uncertainty affecting them as much as anything else to do with Brexit?
I think, yeah, the reality is, again, we forget there's always uncertainty. Like 10 years ago, we could be sitting here, we'd be worrying about people like Northern Rock going out of business. So there's always uncertainty, and that was uncharted waters with the financial crisis. We're into uncharted waters here. It's amazing how resilient business is across Britain. They really generally get up every morning at 5 or 6 o'clock, and they worry about hiring people, taking on apprentices, looking after their customers, exporting and running their business. And the level of focus they have on running their business, and you just look about the financial meltdown, 2/3 of the jobs of this country have been created by small and medium businesses. They've just got on and carried on and grown.
Richard, as you would know, plenty of economists say the shockwave hasn't even nearly hit us yet.
These are the same economists that were part of Project Fear that said, you know, the world was going to collapse on June the 24th last year. They were almost all wrong. with the exception of economists for free trade. The reality is, we've got over 250 occupiers of buildings around the country that we manage in our business, and almost to a business. They are busy, they're expanding, you're working really hard. It's such a transparent, hard-working country and economy with very good industrial relations. I think conditions are actually much better than the doomsayers and the economists believe.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think, and I've been very critical past of the doomsayers, the naysayers. I think the narrative from the politicians, especially whoever gets elected on June the 8th, has to be positive, because Britain have got fantastic entrepreneurs, and they carry on, and they will carry on. And I think it's really important to focus on that every day they get up, look at expanding their business. A lot of these businesses have funded themselves or borrowed from friends and family to start their businesses, and they've got nowhere else to go, and they're really focused on, particularly the exporters, driving growth because of the cheaper pound.
Richard, you're keen to chip in.
There's a really important point here, which is that actually business leaders and politicians have got to infuse some confidence amongst the public that actually WTO is fine. It is. That's what most countries around the world trade under. Most people are not members. Countries are not members of the European Union. America, China, Australia, they trade with the EU under WTO. It's fine. Don't scare people.
Just a final thought. Stephen, you worked as an advisor to the government. I mean, are our executives inside the government up to this job, do you think?
I think, it is a case where government and private sector should work together. We always say keep a chair empty for the entrepreneurs, but let's get them in the room. I think the government was looking at consultation with the private sector. I would commend that. And on the other side with the EU, exactly the same. Because what we fear, actually, is we stop the progress we've made on deregulation, on a much more fair tax environment, and allow the blockers that are getting in the way of business being removed. We hope that the government just doesn't become myopic on Brexit, and we want them to really drive some of the deregulation initiatives.